As product leaders, we often hear that data-driven decision-making is crucial for success. But there's a catch. Measuring the wrong things at the wrong time can blind us to significant opportunities and changes in our market. A few years ago, a leading electronics manufacturer was preparing to launch 2 flagship products that would have positioned them ahead of their competitors in an emerging market segment. Their product team had developed innovative features that early user testing suggested would be game-changing. But rather than moving forward with the launch, they got caught in what I call the measurement trap. The team wanted to be data-driven, so they built extensive analytics systems to track every aspect of the product's use. They built measures for user engagement with each feature, conducted detailed market analysis, and built complex models to predict adoption rates. This measurement and analysis took time their competitors used to develop similar features. By the time they finally launched, their competitive advantage had eroded. What could have been a market-leading position turned into a $300 million loss in potential sales. The measurement systems they built were impressive, but they measured themselves right out of their market opportunity. This raises a critical question we'll explore in this module. When should we measure, and when should we stop? Even more importantly, how do we know if we're measuring the right things at the right time? That electronics manufacturer's story illustrates a crucial principle. Every metric has a cost, both obvious and hidden. The obvious costs are easy to spot. Engineering time spent building tracking systems, storage costs for collecting data, and team resources needed for analysis. But the hidden costs? Those can be far more damaging. Consider what happened with the manufacturer. Their desire to be data-driven led them to build extensive measurement systems before launch. While they were busy building to analyze future performance, their market opportunity was slipping away. This is a perfect example of opportunity cost. Every hour spent on measurement was an hour not spent on shipping their product. And they're not alone. I've seen early-stage startups track dozens of metrics from day one, thinking they must capture everything possible. One notable example was the team tracking 47 different metrics before they even launched. The result? They spent more time building measurements than building actual value for their customers. This over-measurement typically creates 3 significant problems. Teams get overwhelmed by data and struggle to focus on what matters. Engineering resources get diverted from building valuable features, and analysis paralysis sets in as teams try to make sense of too many metrics. Now, I know what you're thinking. Matthew, didn't you just tell us that we shouldn't focus on a single metric? And you're right, the solution isn't to collapse back to a single North Star metric, nor is it to build measurement systems that are too complex. It's to measure strategically. Think of metrics like tools in a toolbox. You don't need every tool for every job, and using too many tools at once can actually slow you down. So, how do we measure strategically? Before adding any new metric to their toolbox, successful product teams ask themselves 3 essential questions. Let's examine each one. The first question is, what decision will this metric inform? This might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how often teams collect data without a clear decision in mind. Think about our electronics manufacturer. They built extensive analytics systems, but were they clear about what decisions these metrics would drive? Every metric should connect to a specific action. If you observe behavior X, you'll do Y. If you can't articulate what decisions the metric will inform, you're probably not ready to measure it. The second question is, do we have enough context for this metric to be meaningful? This is where many teams, especially startups, stumble. They try to measure things too early, before they have sufficient data to draw meaningful conclusions. Consider measuring churn rates when you only have a handful of customers, or trying to evaluate engineering team velocity in their first sprint. Without adequate context, these measurements can lead to false conclusions or, worse, drive the wrong behaviors. The third question is, are you ready and willing to act on the data? This is crucial. If you ask a question, you need to be prepared to act on the answer, even if it's not what you hope to see. You need both the authority and the resources to make changes based on what you learn. If you survey your users about feature preferences, but don't have the resources to build what they want, you're not just wasting time, you're potentially damaging trust with your user base. Now that we understand these essential questions, let's talk about timing. Knowing when to start and stop measuring is crucial for success. The best product teams start with what I call minimum viable measurement, the smallest set of metrics that will inform your most critical decisions. This approach helps you avoid the common trap of measuring everything just because you can. Think about what decision you need to make next, then work backward to determine what minimum data you need to make that decision confidently. Dropbox's early days illustrate this perfectly. Instead of immediately building complex tracking systems, they took a minimal approach. They created a video demonstration of their product concept and measured just one thing: how many people tried to click the download button. This single measurement told them everything they needed to know about initial demand. Only after confirming genuine interest did they begin implementing more comprehensive measurements. By starting with minimum viable measurement, they used their resources efficiently while gathering the needed insights. But knowing when to stop measuring is just as important as knowing when to start. You should consider stopping when a metric no longer informs your decisions. This often happens when a product feature or process has reached stability. You should also stop when the cost of measurement outweighs its benefit, or when you notice the measurement driving wrong behaviors in your team. Amazon, despite its tremendous data capabilities, demonstrates this principle well. They regularly review their metrics and stop actively tracking those that have reached a steady state or no longer drive decisions. While they might continue collecting the data, they remove these metrics from regular review meetings and dashboards. This helps them maintain focus on the metrics that still matter for decision making. But measurement decisions aren't always binary. It's not just about starting or stopping. Often, the most sophisticated product teams recognize when they need to evolve their measurement approach. This brings us to another crucial skill: knowing when to change course. Sometimes you need to adjust what you're measuring instead of stopping measurement entirely. This might happen when your business goals evolve, your current measurements reveal new, more important questions, or your team discovers better ways to measure the same thing. Medium's evolution provides an interesting example. They initially focused on total time reading as their key engagement metric. However, as they grew, they realized this measurement didn't fully capture what they cared about. Some readers might spend a lot of time on an article because it was poorly written and hard to understand, not because it was engaging. This insight led them to develop more sophisticated measurements that better reflected quality engagement rather than just time spent. This evolution in measurement isn't just about finding better metrics. It's about staying aligned with what matters most for your product and users. Often, early-stage products focus heavily on acquisition metrics, but as they mature, they need to shift toward engagement and retention measurements. A B2B product might start by measuring feature adoption, but later it needs to measure the business impact on its customers. The key is to remain flexible and observant. Your measurements should evolve as your product matures and you better understand your users. Don't get attached to metrics just because you've always tracked them. Instead, regularly ask yourself, is this still the best way to measure what we care about? Now that we understand when to start, stop, and change our measurements, let's talk about how to put this into practice. Start by auditing your current metrics. Look at each one and ask those 3 essential questions we discussed earlier. What decision does the metric inform? Do we have enough context for it to be meaningful? Are we ready and willing to act on what it tells us? You might be surprised how many metrics don't pass this basic test. Before talking about creating new metrics, let's discuss recognizing when you're measuring too much. Watch for these warning signs in your organization. First, notice how your team behaves in metric review meetings. If people's eyes glaze over during metric discussions, or if you frequently hear, "We'll dig into that later," but never do, you're probably tracking too much. When everything is important, nothing is important. Second, pay attention to how metrics drive decisions. If you have dashboards full of graphs that no one has referenced in your team's last 3 decisions, that's a clear sign of overmeasurement. Third, listen for phrases like, "We should track this just in case," or "It might be useful someday." These are usually red flags. Remember, every metric has a cost, not just in tracking and storage, but in team attention and cognitive load. The danger here isn't just wasted time, it's that overmeasurement can create a vicious cycle. Teams feel overwhelmed by data, so they spend less time on each metric. This leads to shallow analysis, which prompts requests for even more metrics to fill perceived gaps. Before you know it, you're in the same situation as our electronics manufacturer, so busy measuring that you're missing market opportunities. Watch for signs of this in your team's energy and focus. When teams are measuring the right things, metrics energize decision making. When they're measuring too much, metrics become a drain on team resources and morale. When you identify metrics that aren't serving you well, don't feel pressured to keep them just because you've invested time in tracking them. Remember our electronics manufacturer. Sometimes the cost of continuing to measure outweighs the benefit. It's better to have 5 metrics that drive real decisions than 50 that create noise. For new metrics, create a clear measurement plan before collecting data. Document what decision this metric will inform, what threshold will trigger action, and what specific actions you'll take based on the results. This helps avoid the common trap of measuring something just because you can. Most importantly, build in regular review periods. Schedule time quarterly to evaluate your metrics. Are they still serving their purpose? Are there new measurements you need to add? Old ones you need to retire? This kind of regular maintenance keeps your measurement system lean and effective. Throughout this module, we've explored how the timing of measurement can make or break product success. From our electronic manufacturer's costly overmeasurement to Medium's successful metric evolution, we've seen that effective measurement isn't about measuring everything. It's about measuring the right things at the right time. Before measuring anything, we learn to ask ourselves 3 fundamental questions. What decision will this metric inform? Do we have enough context for the metric to be meaningful? And are we ready and willing to act on what the data tells us? These questions help us develop better judgment about measurement decisions. We also discovered the power of minimum viable measurement, starting with just enough data to inform our next critical decision. This approach, exemplified by Dropbox's early success, helps teams avoid the common pitfalls of overmeasurement. And speaking of pitfalls, we learned to recognize the warning signs of measuring too much: glazed eyes in metric reviews, unused dashboards, and that dangerous phrase, "let's track it just in case." As you return to your work, take a fresh look at your current metrics. Are they actively informing decisions? Do you have the context and resources to act on what they tell you? Most importantly, are you measuring just enough, or have you fallen into the trap of measuring too much? Remember, the goal isn't to measure more, it's to measure better. By applying what you've learned in this module, you are better equipped to make smarter measurement decisions that drive your product forward.